She had learned long ago that mastery often looks like silence. While others talked, compared scores, or polished their reputations louder than their weapons, she worked with a slow, deliberate calm that made people overlook her. The rifle lay across her lap like a familiar weight rather than a symbol of power. Every movement of her hands was precise, unhurried, almost meditative, as if she were cleaning not a machine but a memory. To anyone watching casually, she was just another shooter maintaining her gear, another face that blended into the background of the range. That was the advantage. People expect greatness to announce itself. They expect confidence to be loud, skill to be proven through constant display. She had learned that true ability doesn't need witnesses. It only needs the right moment. Her history wasn't written in medals pinned to a chest or stories told over drinks. It was written in repetition, thousands of hours spent correcting mistakes no one else could see, learning how her breathing changed under pressure, how her focus sharpened when everything else faded out. She understood her rifle not as an object, but as an extension of intent. Every bolt, every surface she cleaned had been tested under conditions where failure was not an option. That kind of familiarity builds a quiet certainty that doesn't seek approval. To outsiders, her demeanor could be mistaken for hesitation or humility. In reality, it was discipline. She didn't rush to prove herself because she didn't need to. The skill was already there, settled deep, waiting. The silence around her wasn't emptiness, it was containment. When the question eventually came, it didn't feel like a challenge to her. It felt like recognition arriving late. The distance mentioned wasn't shocking, it was simply a number, a variable to be accounted for. Wind, elevation, patience. She had faced harder tests when no one was watching. The difference now was that someone important had finally noticed the stillness and wondered what it concealed. Unexpected mastery is unsettling because it disrupts assumptions. People are comfortable when talent follows predictable paths, when the most capable person looks the part. She did not. She looked ordinary by design, not as an act, but as a byproduct of focus. She had nothing to prove until someone asked the wrong question. And when that moment arrived, her calm didn't change. No smile, no bravado. Just a pause, the kind that comes before certainty reveals itself. The surprise wouldn't be in her reaction, but in the result. Because true mastery doesn't announce its arrival. It simply delivers, leaving everyone else to reassess what they thought they understood. When a special forces sniper speaks, the room changes, even if no one says it out loud. Experience carries a weight that doesn't need explanation. Years of selection, combat, failure, and survival refine a person's instincts until their judgment becomes a quiet authority. That is why the question mattered less for its words and more for who asked it. It wasn't curiosity from a casual observer. It was attention from someone who had seen the limits of human skill and knew how rare it was to approach them. He didn't ask to impress anyone. People like him don't throw out challenges for entertainment. They measure, observe, and wait. Long before the question left his mouth, he had already noticed what others had missed. The way she handled the rifle without wasted movement, the absence of tension in her posture, the focus that didn't flicker even when conversations drifted around her. These were signs you only recognize after years of watching people fail under pressure. Authority isn't about rank in moments like these. It's about trust in experience. When someone with that background asks a question, it carries an unspoken validation. It suggests that the person being addressed has crossed an invisible threshold, from anonymous to noteworthy. She didn't earn that attention through noise or claims. She earned it by moving correctly when no one thought it mattered. The number he mentioned wasn't random. It was intentionally extreme, sitting at the edge of what even elite snipers consider possible. By choosing that distance, he wasn't testing her ego, he was testing reality. Only someone confident in their own expertise would pose such a question seriously. It was a way of saying, without saying it, I think you might be operating at my level or beyond. For her, the authority in the question wasn't intimidating. It was clarifying. Validation from peers means little when it comes too easily, but recognition from someone who understands the cost of mastery is different. It strips away doubt, not because it inflates confidence, but because it confirms what long preparation has already proven. She didn't need his approval to be capable, but his recognition placed her in a rare category, one reserved for those whose skills speak louder than reputation. This kind of validation reshapes the scene. Suddenly, the silence around her feels intentional rather than accidental. The background figure becomes the focal point, not because she demanded it, but because authority redirected the spotlight. Others might question, speculate, or dismiss, but his presence eliminated uncertainty. If he saw something worth asking about, then it was worth paying attention to. Authority validation works because it anchors the extraordinary in credibility. It reassures the audience that what is about to happen isn't fantasy or exaggeration, but a real collision of elite standards and hidden talent. In that moment, the question wasn't just a test, it was an acknowledgement that she belonged in conversations reserved for the very best. The distance itself was the real antagonist in the moment. Numbers have a way of stripping emotion from a situation, turning awe into mathematics, but this one refused to stay abstract. It hung in the air with weight, because everyone who understood it knew what it represented. At that range, the target is no longer something you simply see. It becomes an idea, a calculation balanced on the edge of physics, patience, and control. Most shooters spend their lives mastering distances that still allow room for error. This distance offered none. What made the challenge extraordinary wasn't bravado, but precision. Extreme precision is unforgiving. It doesn't care how confident you feel or how impressive your resume looks. Every variable becomes magnified. The subtle shift of air that can't be felt on skin, the curvature of terrain, the slow passage of time between intent and impact. At such ranges, the shot is no longer a single action. It is a sequence of decisions made long before the trigger is touched. For many, hearing such a number immediately triggers self-protection. The mind rushes to reasons it can't be done, to statistics and probabilities that justify refusal. That reaction is natural. Precision at that level demands acceptance of risk, not just of failure, but of being exposed. If you attempt something that extreme, you reveal exactly where your limits are. Her stillness in response said more than words could. She didn't dismiss the number, nor did she romanticize it. To her, it wasn't a dare. It was a boundary line drawn clearly in the sand. Extreme challenges simplify things that way. They remove ambiguity, either the skill exists or it doesn't. What captivates people about such a challenge is that it compresses years of discipline into a single moment. Every hour of training, every quiet correction, every missed shot absorbed without complaint becomes part of that distance. The audience may only see the attempt, but the distance carries the invisible weight of preparation behind it. That is why it commands attention. It transforms quiet competence into something measurable, undeniable. There is also an honesty in extreme precision that smaller feats lack. At ordinary ranges, success can be attributed to luck. At extreme ones, luck loses its influence. Precision becomes the only explanation left standing. That is what makes the challenge compelling. It promises clarity. If she succeeds, there will be no argument, no footnotes, no excuses. The number itself becomes symbolic. It represents the edge of what is accepted as possible and dares someone to stand there without flinching. It forces everyone watching to confront their own assumptions about limits, about who is capable of approaching them, and about how often true excellence goes unnoticed simply because no one asked the right question. In that sense, the challenge was never just about hitting a distant target. It was about whether silent mastery could withstand the harshest measurement available. Extreme precision doesn't allow stories to hide behind drama. It delivers a single, uncompromising answer, and once given, nothing looks the same again. The moment carries extra weight, because expectations are already stacked against her before she ever moves. In spaces defined by tradition and extreme standards, assumptions form quickly and quietly. People decide who belongs and who doesn't based on appearance, posture, even silence. The word she, in this context, isn't just a descriptor, it's a disruption. It challenges an unspoken mental image of who occupies the highest levels of lethal precision, and that tension fuels the power of the moment. What makes this narrative compelling is not that she is presented as extraordinary by declaration, but that she is underestimated by default. No one announces disbelief out loud, yet it exists in the pause, in the sideways glances, in the way expectations lower without conscious intent. That underestimation becomes the pressure point of the story. It creates a gap between perception and reality, and that gap is where the fantasy gains strength. This isn't about superiority over others. It's about competence existing without permission. Her presence alone questions a long-standing bias that mastery in such a brutal, technical discipline must look a certain way. She doesn't perform confidence to be accepted. She doesn't narrate her own worth. Her skill doesn't seek validation from stereotypes, and that refusal is quietly defiant. The power fantasy works because it mirrors real frustration many people recognize, being capable while unseen, prepared while doubted. Her gender amplifies that theme, not as a weakness to overcome theatrically, but as a fact others misinterpret. The satisfaction comes from watching assumptions dissolve, not through speeches or confrontation, but through outcome. Results don't argue, they replace belief systems. There is also restraint in how her strength is portrayed. She is not written as reckless or emotionally driven. She doesn't need to prove them wrong with anger. That calm control is part of the fantasy. It reframes power as composure, not dominance. She doesn't rise by pushing others down. She rises by standing exactly where she already belongs. In this way, the fantasy feels earned rather than forced. It respects the intelligence of the audience by letting the imbalance speak for itself. The reader understands the weight of the moment because they understand the environment. They know how rare it is for someone like her to be taken seriously in that space. And they also know how undeniable excellence becomes when it finally has no choice but to be acknowledged. The appeal lies in reversal without exaggeration. She doesn't transform into something else. She simply reveals what was already there. That is what makes it resonate. It suggests that power doesn't need to be loud, masculine, or performative to be real. It only needs opportunity. When that opportunity arrives, the fantasy completes itself, not with applause, but with silence giving way to respect. And in that shift, the story delivers something deeply satisfying. The idea that capability, when undeniable, rewrites the rules without ever asking for permission. The question itself is engineered to linger. It doesn't rush toward an answer. It opens a space the mind is compelled to fill. Can you hit it? Is simple on the surface, but paired with that extreme distance, it becomes a doorway rather than a sentence. The story pauses there on purpose, allowing curiosity to do the work. The reader isn't pushed forward by explanation, but pulled by uncertainty. This is the power of an unanswered challenge. The human mind dislikes incomplete patterns. When presented with a situation where the outcome is withheld, attention sharpens instinctively. The title doesn't promise success or failure. It promises a moment. That restraint is what makes it effective. By stopping at the question, it invites the reader to step inside the scene and wait for the answer alongside everyone else. The curiosity deepens because of who is being asked and who is asking. A quiet figure, previously unnoticed, is suddenly addressed by an elite authority with an almost impossible standard. That collision creates tension. If she says yes, how could that possibly be true? If she says no, why was the question asked at all? Either outcome feels meaningful, and that dual possibility keeps the reader engaged. The specificity of the challenge sharpens the hook further. A vague test would be forgettable, but a precise distance turns curiosity into obsession. Readers who understand the difficulty feel disbelief. Readers who don't still sense that the number is extreme. Both groups are hooked because the story promises revelation either of astonishing ability or of a dramatic misjudgment. What makes this curiosity-driven structure especially powerful is that it respects the audience. It doesn't over-explain or exaggerate. It trusts that the reader will recognize the stakes without being told how to feel. That trust creates investment. Instead of being passive observers, readers become participants, mentally running scenarios, calculating odds, questioning assumptions. The pause before the answer is where imagination takes over. In that pause, the reader begins to assign meaning to everything that came before. The silence, the calm, the unnoticed competence. All of it retroactively gains significance because now it might be leading somewhere extraordinary. The question reframes the past moments and transforms them into clues. This technique also mirrors real-life moments of revelation. Rarely does excellence announce itself cleanly. It is often preceded by ambiguity, by uncertainty about whether what we are witnessing is ordinary or exceptional. The unanswered question captures that exact sensation. It holds the story at the edge of certainty without tipping it over. By the time the reader wants the answer, they are already committed. They don't just want to know what happens. They want to see their assumptions confirmed or destroyed. That emotional investment is the true hook. The story hasn't fired a single shot yet, but it has already landed its mark. And that is why the question works so well. It doesn't sell the outcome. It sells anticipation. It promises that whatever comes next will matter, and once that promise is made, the reader has no choice but to follow it to the end.